No one in the history of the world has done anything like it. That understatement comes from Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg talking about mobile messaging provider WhatsApp. And that's why he is spending $19 billion to buy it. Now, WhatsApp is said to be the world's most popular messaging app for smartphones. It enables users to send text messages to cell phones over broadband rather than the cell networks. And of course, that eliminates the texting fees. Facebook is hoping its big buy will cement its dominance in the global messaging market and more. To start with, WhatsApp immediately gives Facebook some 450 million active users. Considering WhatsApp was founded just 5 years ago, that makes its growth nothing less than astonishing. And it isn't done yet. It's adding some 1 million new users every day. Its growth rate far outstrips other well-known internet companies. As you can see on this graph, the growth of such providers as Skype, Twitter, Gmail, and even Facebook itself pales next to the breathtaking rise of WhatsApp. But for Facebook, WhatsApp's appeal isn't just its 500 million users or those startling growth numbers. It's the places where the WhatsApp application is so popular. And that turns out to be in huge markets where right now Facebook is pretty much falling on its face. To better understand the big buy, we spoke with Ed Hammond. He's the mergers and acquisition correspondent for the Financial Times, asking him, is this really a good deal?
I think it was a good deal in as much as Facebook obviously need to keep growing. I think it's very important that they keep trying to tap into that young usership. It's exactly the same young usership, really, that the whole Facebook model was predicated on in the first place. I think almost more importantly, this was a deal that they couldn't afford not to do. They need to keep expanding, they need to keep growing, and they need to get into these new markets where they're not currently having much success with their own mobile app platform. So I think this was a deal that, yes, the price is very high, but absolutely was one that Facebook had to do.
When you look at the deal, one of the areas of growth has to be in the emerging markets in countries like Brazil, even across the European nations, but India and other places as well. These are places where Facebook simply doesn't have the same penetration.
I think that's right. So Facebook has very low penetration in a lot of these markets, but particularly when it comes to its mobile messaging app. And I think Europe is actually the best example of this. I mean, even in some of the developed European countries like Italy, like Spain, like Germany, it's got a very, very low penetration. Whereas you look at something like WhatsApp, I mean, it's incredible. In Spain, WhatsApp has 97% penetration among users.
As we look at Facebook's purchase, the price itself seems so high. They're paying $45 a user, and Vibe was just sold for a fraction of that. How do you justify it?
I think that is a very high price, and I think when people look at the 19 billion figure, even by Silicon Valley standards, where people are kind of used to these eye-popping valuations, they're saying, wow, that's very, very high. How are they going to make this swing? The difficulty for Facebook now is how do they monetize that access? They've suddenly found themselves an extra 450 million users. They're adding 1 million users a day. But how do they actually turn that into cash? WhatsApp so far have been very firm that they don't want advertising. It's something they've always eschewed, and that's part really of their whole model. And so the question for Facebook is, what do they do to get their 19 billion back?
Mergers and acquisitions has once again yielded us another internet billionaire. This one from the Ukraine, came to the United States, didn't even speak English. I guess he was turned down for the job at Facebook as well.
That's right. He's made his money. He's assuming he's going to stay on. He's been offered a board seat at Facebook, which one has to assume he will take. And it's a tiny company. I mean, it has a very, very small number of staff and has sort of stuck to its guns on, you know, this is what they want to do. They care very much about privacy. They don't want to stick advertisements on there. They don't want these cartoons attached that also can be used to generate revenue. So it's a very pure business model. And whether or not they're able to hold on to that under the auspices of Facebook remains to be seen.
It's interesting to note somebody who comes from a country like Ukraine understands exactly the markets it appeals to, the people that don't want to pay for SMS messages. They want to be able to send them, and they want their privacy as well. This company is one that had vowed it would never turn over the messages of its users.
I think that's right. I think the privacy thing, you've hit on exactly the point of why it's so successful. It's stuck to its guns on this privacy. It's something that it's been absolutely passionate about, and he's been passionate about sort of publicly. And actually, it was interesting. Zuckerberg last night on the conference call said it was something that they were going to continue. It was something that wouldn't be changed under Facebook. And actually, he was very keen that WhatsApp kept its sort of startup mentality, and that really it would be incubated within Facebook rather than integrated into its sort of overall business.
It's a fascinating story. It is one we're going to continue to watch, and it only raises the question, what comes next? What, $1 billion for Instagram, 19 billion for WhatsApp, and, well, what's next?
Yeah. Well, I think it leaves us the question, Jim. We need to develop something of ourselves, because it's obviously where it's at. If you can come up with a clever idea and you can make it work, and it just, the valuations being paid are phenomenal. And I think it's impossible to predict where the next success comes from. But one thing can be sure, the valuations are going to be sky high. Ed
Hammond, correspondent for the Financial Times. Great to have you with us. Great to have your input on this fascinating story. I would call it the business story of the week.